You're listening to Keith Sports News. Hello. Hello. Welcome back. That's right. To Keith Sports News, or KSN for short. This is it says episode 3. That's not episode 3. This is episode 4. There we go. I fixed that. Yes, I am using OBS for this recording. All right. So, this is the end of 2024. And this episode will be me talking about the best sports championship games that I watched per year. Okay? All right? Look, I'm at a bar. This is part of the house, so I decided to, how New Year's is a big drinking day. Well, that's why I chose to sit in here. All right. The shirt that I'm wearing, oh look, an NFL shirt. And this is the old logo that has a whole bunch of stars. The logo now has 4 stars on each side, and the reason why that is because there are 4 divisions in each conference, which means it's a total of 8 divisions. So that's why there are 8 stars with 4 on each side of the logo. But this logo looks so much better in my opinion. So that was before the commissioner, Roger Goodell, took over. All right. And look, my hat has stars on it as well and stripes. So yeah. All right. Before we get into the list of the best sports championship games that I watch per year, we have some sad news from the past couple of days. You probably have heard the sad news, and yes, we are going to get sad news from time to time. This is the first time where I have to break some sad news, but we want to say the sad news first, okay? So, on Friday, okay, a few hours after I released episode 3 of KSN, I listened to, how in the last episode I talk about my favorite sports podcasts and all that. Well, a lot of the sports shows, they didn't do a show on Friday. A lot of the guys that I listen to every week had the day off. However, one person didn't have the day off, and that was Mad Dog Christopher Russo, okay? And I listened to his show live. His show is on SiriusXM on his own station called Mad Dog Sports Radio from 2 to 5 p.m. Central Time, okay? So, I was listening to him, and every Friday during the NFL season, he would get Phil Simms on to do his talking about the upcoming football games and all that. So, I've always liked Phil Simms, but this is where I heard the sad news. Legendary CBS Sports announcer Greg Gumbel has passed away. So that's how I found out the sad news. Phil Simms broke the news on Greg Gumbel's passing. So we're going to talk a little bit about Greg Gumbel. Okay. I remember Greg Gumbel. However, I have not heard or see him on television in years. But I do remember him. About 10 years ago, when I first started watching the National Football League, I remember him as an announcer. So, whenever someone, some big name passes away, I would look up that person and get a little history from that person, that name. Greg Gumbel was actually the first African American announcer to call a Super Bowl, and Phil Simms was his partner. And this was before Jim Nantz replaced Greg Gumbel. All right, so if you are old enough to remember Greg Gumbel and Phil Simms, those were the good old days of CBS Sports. They called two Super Bowls together, and Greg Gumbel, I think the year after the Super Bowl in 2004, he went to the studio, the NFL Today show. He was the host of that for one season, and then in 2006, James Brown replaced him. And James Brown is still the host of that show today. So Greg Gumbel became the secondary play-by-play man for CBS Sports. So he was in quite a bit of big games. I think the biggest game that I remember watching and listening to him was that playoff game that went into double overtime between the Baltimore Ravens and the Denver Broncos. That was one of the first NFL games I really watched, and he was the announcer. And man, that's probably one of the best playoff games ever. That game was very cold, freezing, and he was there. He was the announcer. And Greg Gumbel was also one of the studio hosts of March Madness. And also, I heard Mad Dog Christopher Russo was talking about, yeah, Greg Gumbel was also, part of Selection Sunday for March Madness. And I do remember that. Yeah. It's sad, man. I think he stopped announcing a couple of years ago because of his health. And yeah, unexpected news. He has a younger brother named Bryant Gumbel, I think. I don't know much about Bryant because Bryant is more of like a news anchor. But I once saw an old video of 9/11, CBS's coverage of September the 11th attacks, and Bryant Gumbel was the news anchor there. And Bryant, he's just as old as his brother Greg. It's hard to believe how old those guys are. So I want to say rest in peace to Greg Gumbel. He is one of the best. But when I heard them, Mad Dog Unleash, Christopher Russo and Phil Simms, when I heard them talking about we lost a legendary CBS sports announcer, the first name that came to my mind was Vern Lundquist, because Vern just retired. His last, the last big sporting event he was at was the Masters in April. Because Vern is my all-time favorite CBS announcer. I remember watching SEC football back in the day on CBS. He was there. So, and Vern's even older, Yeah. See, CBS Sports has changed. In my opinion, the NFL on CBS is not that great anymore. That's just me. The studio show, they don't have Boomer Esiason and Phil Simms anymore, and we've always liked those guys. So, yeah. But hey, nothing can be the same forever. So, you might like this era. You may not like that era. It is what it is, So, once again, rest in peace to Greg Gumbel. Now we're going to talk about my favorite sports championship games that I watched per year. All right. So let's play a little Polar Sports soundtracks. For those of you that follow my main channel, I did a live stream of Polar Bowler, a game that came out 20 years ago. So let's play some of that soundtrack. All right. Now let's get into the list that I made. I made a Google Doc. All right, so 2013 was really the first year I got into watching sports. Okay, and one of the first games that I watched in 2013 was the Super Bowl. Super Bowl 47 between the Baltimore Ravens and San Francisco 49ers in the Superdome in New Orleans. That had that power outage for like a half an hour. The game was on CBS, and that was really the first Super Bowl I watched live, like actually getting into it. And that is the best Super Bowl that I watched live. The first Super Bowl I watched live was also the best Super Bowl that I watched live. So it was a great, great Super Bowl. I was rooting for the Baltimore Ravens, and they were winning pretty big at halftime. I think it was 28-6. And after that power outage, the 49ers made a comeback, and the game was close at the very end. But in the end, the Ravens won, and it was Harbaugh against Harbaugh, brother versus brother. That was big. So I really enjoyed that game. And the next Super Bowl will be in New Orleans, and Baltimore Ravens, they might go back to the Superdome and win. All right, 2014. The best championship game I watched in 2014 was the college football BCS national championship game between Florida State and Auburn. That was a great game, and I believe that was the last championship game that Brent Musburger announced before Chris Fowler took over. I believe that game was in the Rose Bowl in Pasadena, California. That was also the last BCS national championship game before they had the 4-team playoff format in 2015. So that was a great game. I forgot who I was rooting for because I think Florida State was undefeated. They were the number one team, Auburn. What made Auburn got in was they beat Alabama. Remember that kick six? The last play, they call it the kick six. That basically made Auburn going to the national championship game. So that was a great game. 2015. This is different now. Oh, here's my water. I was wondering where it is because I do a lot of talking here. All right, 2015. It was the Triple Crown of horse racing. If you are a horse racing fan, you know what I'm talking about. American Pharoah winning the Triple Crown. The Triple Crown is so hard to win. It's only happened 13 times in over, I don't know, when was the first one? Over 100 years ago? It's insane. It's so hard. It's so tough. But American Pharoah was one of the best racehorses of all time. So the Triple Crown, you have to win the Kentucky Derby, then the Preakness, and then the Belmont in a 5-week period. It is tough. So that's got to be the best championship that I watched. Moving on to 2016, it was the World Series. And I got to say, that's probably one of the best or the best World Series that I watched live between the Chicago Cubs and the Cleveland Indians at the time. It went down to Game 7. I wanted the Cubs to win because they haven't won it in a long, long, long time. And they were actually down 3-1 in that series. But Game 7 was something else. It was crazy. And in the 10th inning, there was a rain delay. Yeah, there was actually a rain delay for a little bit. And then the Chicago Cubs found a way to win. It was awesome. So I'm glad they won it. Yeah, it was tough because the Cleveland Indians looked like they were going to win that World Series, and they also haven't won it in a long time as well. But the Chicago Cubs, it's been like 100 years or so since they've won it. So that was awesome. 2017 was also the World Series between the Houston Astros and the LA Dodgers. That was a great World Series as well. It also went down to 7 games. Yes, I know the Houston Astros were cheating in that World Series. They were caught about 2 years later. The sign stealing scandal, but no one knew they were cheating back then. None of the fans knew they were cheating back then. Back then, I was a big Houston Astros fan. I went to some of their games in 2017, and I really thought that the LA Dodgers would win that World Series because they looked like they were the better team. Let me tell you, Game 5 was something. The Houston Astros won Game 5 by a score of 13-12 in 10 innings. That game was like over 5.5 hours. It's insane. So they won the World Series. I was so happy. That was a great World Series, even though they cheated. But like I said, watching that World Series at the time, we didn't know they were cheating until 2 years later. So that was a great one as well. 2018, back to horse racing. That's right, another Triple Crown winner by the name of Justify. Justify is still the last horse to win the Triple Crown. It's crazy. 2 Triple Crowns in 4 years? Wow. And we haven't had one since 2018. Justify, man. What a horse. A big horse, too. I remember the Preakness would always be around my birthday, and it was pouring down rain, and it was also kind of foggy as well, or really foggy, and he somehow won. That horse somehow won the Preakness. And then the Belmont Stakes, nice and sunny, clear skies, it's great. So you always want to see a horse win the Triple Crown. So Bob Baffert, the trainer, he's won 2 Triple Crowns. All right, so now moving on to 2019. This is a tennis one, and that is Wimbledon 2019. The men's Wimbledon final between Novak Djokovic and Roger Federer. I did watch quite a bit of that, and man, that was probably one of the best finals ever that I've seen in tennis. A lot of people were rooting for Federer because, he's older and he's won Wimbledon so many times. And it looked like, I think Federer had a match point at one point, and he couldn't win it. It went into that tiebreaker in the 5th set, 12-12, which was kind of weird, but it went to that, and Novak has won a magnificent Wimbledon final. And I actually wanted Novak to win because I wanted him to catch up to Federer and Nadal for the Grand Slam numbers. And and I think at the time Novak was tied with Pete Sampras, or either he tied with Sampras or he passed Sampras. Because remember, over 20 years ago, Sampras had the most championships, the most Grand Slam titles. And then the big three came in, and they were just dominating tennis year after year for like 15 years straight. Yep, that's got to be the best era in tennis history, and it's kind of sad that that era came to an end when Federer announced his retirement. And recently, Nadal retired, and now Novak is the only one left. I think Novak, he's still a pretty good player for his age. I don't know how long he'll keep doing it. Maybe, I don't know, maybe 2 more years. He's 37. Maybe he'll go on until he's 40. 2020, the COVID year. But this championship game happened early 2020, before COVID shut down the world. And that was the CFP National Championship game between LSU and Clemson. Okay, I had to pick that one because that was one of the last big championship games with a crowd before COVID shut down the world, which was in mid-March. All right, so I was rooting for LSU because I live in LSU country, in the capital city of Louisiana, and undefeated Joe Burrow, really great player. That was probably one of the best offensive teams I've ever saw. Joe Burrow, Heisman winner, and they had to play undefeated Clemson. Clemson at the time, they haven't lost in like 2 years. They were like 29-0. I think Clemson was actually the favorite, or well, maybe not the favorite, but like according to I remember looking up the ESPN matchup predictor, they picked slightly Clemson, like a 53%, something like that. It was close, and the game was close until the fourth quarter. The game was in New Orleans, the Superdome, so it was kind of like an LSU home crowd game. And I was listening to the LSU sports radio on the SEC network. Yeah, but you can still watch the game while you're listening to the LSU sports radio. So that was a great game. I'm glad LSU won because Clemson, they won it the year before. And then, not too long after that, COVID happened. Moving on to 2021. This is back to tennis. This was Novak Djokovic winning the French Open in 2021. There was a crowd, but it wasn't a full capacity, so it was like a limited amount of people there. But so I think it was in the semifinals, Novak beat Rafa Nadal to advance to the French Open finals, or Roland Garros. And man, when he beat Nadal, I'm like, he's gonna win this thing. He's gonna win the French Open. And I'm glad he did. I'm glad he won the French Open because he was very close at the time, catching up to Federer and Nadal for the Grand Slam numbers. But man, that finals, he was down 2 sets to love. And he had to win the next 3 sets. And that's what he did. He won the next 3 sets. What? That's insane. He was playing against Stefanos Tsitsipas. So I'm glad Novak won the French. Man, that was insane that he actually did that. Down 2 sets to love and you win the next 3 sets. Unbelievable. I think Novak really is the greatest tennis player of all time. I know a lot of people don't like him for whatever reason. I think it's because I think it's 2 reasons. Number one, first it was Federer and Nadal, their rivalry, and then Novak basically opened the door and he had both of his rivals. And also, he's Serbian. I don't know what people have against Serbians. I don't know much about Serbia, the country. I know another Serbian athlete. That's Nikola Jokic, that big NBA player dude for the Denver Nuggets. Yeah. Other than that, I don't know. 2022. Back to baseball. Yep, it is the World Series. My favorite team, the Houston Astros, against the Philadelphia Phillies. I really thought the Phillies would win, but the Houston Astros had a great Game 6, and they won. And not only they won it in their home ballpark. Because for many years, man, the World Series winner, they're not even in their home ballpark. It would be the visiting team. So it's nice to see the home team finally win the World Series in their own ballpark. And that's what happened. And also, during that game, it was also the big college football game between Alabama and LSU. I was not watching that game. I know that's a big game because I live in the capital city of Louisiana, but I was not watching LSU Alabama. I was watching Game 6 of the World Series because that was more important, you know? So, but LSU won. I found out LSU beat Alabama in Tiger Stadium. So, oh my gosh, that's like one of the best sports nights ever. Unbelievable. All right. 2023. This is the Canadian Football League, the CFL Grey Cup, which is basically their Super Bowl version of Canadian football. Yes. So, I forgot to mention in a previous episode of my favorite sports and leagues to watch, but I will say it now. The CFL is my favorite sports league to watch ever. It's number one. Yes, it is number one. So, years ago, we used to have cable, and the Grey Cup would be on a ESPN2 network, but it's a TSN broadcast. So, I remember I was watching some of the Grey Cups, 2016, 2017, 2018. There was no season in 2020 because of COVID. They canceled it because Canada is more strict for COVID. 2021, the season came back, but it started late. It was a shorter season, but there was a season. And I have the Canadian Sports Channel's TSN. TSN is really my all-time favorite sports network. I love watching the Canadian Sports Center more than the American version on ESPN. It's more entertaining in my opinion. It's funny because I live nowhere near Canada, but I love watching that network. And I love watching the CFL. I got into it 2022. I got into it until college football started. When college football started, I kind of stopped watching the CFL. Yeah, college football distracted me. They brought me back to watch college games. But then 2023, I permanently decided I'm going to keep watching CFL games. I'm not going to watch much college games until after the CFL season's over. That's what I did. And I did that again in 2024. That's right, the Montreal Alouettes is my favorite team. And they won the Grey Cup against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. At the time, Winnipeg won back-to-back Grey Cups in 2019 and 2021. So they were going for a three-peat. They were going for a three-peat. So, yeah. That was an exciting game. That was really an exciting game. The Grey Cup, I always look forward to that. I've seen quite a bit now. And I really like the announcers, Rod Smith and Glenn Suter. Rod Smith, he's kind of like Chris Fowler. He's like the Chris Fowler version of TSN. He's He's got that voice, you know? So, yeah, okay, I know we're hitting 30 minutes. I usually end the episode, but let's extend it for 5 more minutes, I guess. Actually, no. We're going to extend this for another 15 minutes because I'll tell you why in a little bit. Now let's move on to this year's 2024. So, how many years did I do this? 2013 was the first one. That was really the first year I got into sports. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, this is 12 years of the sports championship games. Alright, so the best sports championship game I watched this year was the Stanley Cup Final. Hockey. The National Hockey League. Okay? Between the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers. Get a drink here for a second. So, yeah, this was a weird final because, well, when we found out that it was Edmonton against Florida, that is a far, far travel. And Florida Panthers, they're in South Florida. They're like near Miami. Edmonton is way up in Canada. It's above Calgary, Canada. And I heard it was the longest distance for traveling. Okay? A long travel, plane flight. It's crazy. It's not the farthest ever. I think the farthest one would have been from Vancouver to South Florida, because Vancouver's like above Seattle, Washington, that Canadian team. But man, Edmonton against Florida, that's such a long, long travel. So, Florida Panthers, they lost the 2023 Stanley Cup Final. So part of me wanted Florida to win. But part of me also wanted Edmonton to win because not only you have Connor McDavid in the Stanley Cup Final, but you also, a Canadian team, a team in Canada, has not won the Stanley Cup Final in like 30 years, I think. Maybe not quite 30 years. But ever since the mid-90s or whatever, whenever, you know, there was a couple times the Canadian team's in it, they would lose the Stanley Cup Final. Yeah. So, I wanted this game, I wanted this series to go to 7 games. And it did. But here's what happened. Florida, they won the first 3 games. And then Edmonton won the next 3 games. And I'm like, oh my gosh. We are about to see history. We are about to see history. That is so rare. That is so hard to make the ultimate comeback in sports. This best of 7 series. One team wins the first 3 games. And then the other team needs to win the next 4 games to win the series. That is insane. History was on the line for Game 7. It actually has happened in hockey, not in the Stanley Cup Final, but it was like in other playoff games. Let me actually look that up real quick. What do you call that? 3-0 deficit? Sports 3-0 comeback. Here he is. I once saw this on Wikipedia. It says a list of teams that overcome a 3-0 series deficit. It's happened once in baseball. The 2004 ALCS between the Boston Red Sox and the New York Yankees. And the Red Sox, they actually won the World Series after they beat the Yankees. And not only that, they won the World Series in a sweep, 4-0, beating the St. Louis Cardinals. It's insane. It has never happened in the National Basketball Association where a team wins 4 games in a row after being down 3-0, but in the National Hockey League, it's happened 4 times. It's actually, okay, it happened once in the final, the Stanley Cup final. It happened in 1942. 1942 Stanley Cup final. The Toronto Maple Leafs against the Detroit Red Wings, and the Maple Leafs made the ultimate comeback. The second time that happened, 1975 quarterfinals between the New York Islanders and the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Islanders made the ultimate comeback. Then it hasn't happened in 35 more years, the 2010 Eastern Conference semifinals between the Philadelphia Flyers and the Boston Bruins. The Flyers made the ultimate comeback. And the last time this happened, not only in hockey, but in the 3 major sports, because National Football League, they don't do best of 7. It was the 2014 Western Conference first round between the LA Kings and the San Jose Sharks, and the Kings made the ultimate comeback. And not only they won that series, they won the Stanley Cup final. They won the Stanley Cup final that year. That's insane. The first round, you're down 3-0, and you won 4 games in a row to win the Western Conference first round. And then you have to win the Western Conference quarterfinal, semifinal, and then the Stanley Cup final. And that is what the LA Kings did. That's nuts. And there have been quite a bit of unsuccessful comebacks. And the last one was the 2024 Stanley Cup final. The Edmonton Oilers, they were so close making history. They were so close making history. That's crazy. And you know what? The craziest part about this series was that these two teams were super, super far away. They were so far away. I was not expecting this at all. And also, it says that Connor McDavid became only the 6th player to win the Conn Smythe Trophy despite losing the finals. Wow. Unbelievable. That's got to be the best sports championship game I watched in 2024. These games, you can look up the highlights on YouTube. They have them. Okay, I also put the second best sports championship games I watched this year. I'm going to be a little bit quicker on this one, alright? So 2013, like I said, that was the first year I got into watching sports. The first one, the Chicago Blackhawks against the Boston Bruins in the Stanley Cup final. That was a great final. I was actually on vacation during the first game or two. We were watching it in our hotel room. And it's funny because I have 3 brothers, 3 older brothers. 2 of them are twins, and I have my oldest brother. The twins, they are Boston Bruins fans, and my oldest brother, he's a Chicago Blackhawks fan. So it's got, we got brother against the 2 twin brothers in the Stanley Cup final. I don't know. I wasn't cheering for either team. I was hoping it would be a great final, and it was a great final. Chicago Blackhawks won that Stanley Cup final. And now the Chicago Blackhawks are like one of the worst teams ever. Yeah, it's kind of like, in the NFL, the New England Patriots were the greatest team, but now they're like one of the worst teams. So I mean, it happens, man. It happens sometimes. Another team, the New Orleans Saints, they used to be great with Drew Brees, but now they suck, because it's a different team now. It's a different era. So, all right. 2014, the second best sports championship game I watched was the World Series. The 2014 World Series between the Kansas City Royals and the San Francisco Giants. That was a great World Series because it went to Game 7. I wanted the Royals to win, but the Giants ended up winning that game. It was the Giants' third World Series championship victory in 5 years. They won it in 2010, 2012, and 2014. And the weird thing is, they all won those on the road. None of those World Series they won were at their own ballpark. See, I wanted the Kansas City Royals to win, but San Francisco Giants won. And I think San Francisco was a wild card team. They were a wild card team that won the World Series. But then the following year, the Kansas City Royals won the World Series, so I was happy about that. Moving on to 2015, the first year of the college football playoff national championship game. It's the Big O's, Ohio State against Oregon. Ohio State won, and I'm glad they won. They beat Alabama. When you beat Alabama, the number one team in the country, you deserve to win the national championship game. However, back then, I did Bowl Mania on ESPN.com, predicting the games, and I did pick Oregon to win the national championship game. The reason why I picked Oregon to win was because they crushed Florida State by a score of 59-20, I think it was. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I think Oregon might win the whole thing after that, and that's why I picked them. But when Ohio State won, I was happy. So, and that was the first year Chris Fowler was the announcer for that. Because before he took over Brent Musburger's spot, he was the host of College Game Day. That was the good old days of Game Day. 2016. It was the March Madness Finals, the national championship game for basketball between North Carolina and Villanova. At first, this was my number one. This was my number one in 2016, but after the Chicago Cubs finally won the World Series, this one's number two. The buzzer beater. The buzzer beater. There was a buzzer beater in the national championship game in basketball. Oh, it's crazy. The last couple of seconds, I think it was the last 10 seconds, North Carolina, they tied the game with a three-pointer. And then the last second, Villanova scored the game-winning basket, and they won. The buzzer beater. Insane, man. It's crazy. Wow. That is unreal. Crazy, man. Crazy. Jim Nantz on the call. He was great. I have no words, man. Just go watch that. Go look up that. Go look up the ending to that game. It's on there. 2017. The second best championship game I watched in 2017 was the national championship game in football between Alabama and Clemson. A rematch, because they faced each other in 2016. Alabama won 2016, but this time Clemson won it in 2017. They got their rematch, revenge. It was so close. I knew it would be a close one. Deshaun Watson was the Clemson quarterback. Jalen Hurts was the Alabama quarterback. Man, how times have changed, man. How times have changed. It looked like Alabama was going to win it again because they were winning most of the game. Clemson basically got the game-winning touchdown with 1 second left. And that's how they won. And it looked like it was going to go into overtime because Clemson was down 31-28. So if you kick the tying field goal, most likely it would go into overtime. But instead, they got the game-winning touchdown, and they won 35-31. I was happy Clemson won because, Alabama, they won this so many times. And I'm happy for Dabo Swinney. And do y'all remember that referee? The Muscles, Mike DeFee, that's his name. The Big 12 referee. Golly, he is all jacked up, that referee. He is all business. Don't mess with that guy. He's not a referee anymore. I don't know what happened. I kind of miss that guy. So, that was a great game. 2018. You'd think it would be another national championship game, but it's actually not. It's Roger Federer winning the Australian Open because history was on the line for him, and he became the first player to reach 20 Grand Slam titles. That's right. First player to win 20 Grand Slams. So that's why this is on that list. Around this time, see, the Australian Open's always in January after the college football national championship game. And Chris Fowler was there. Chris Fowler does both football and tennis. So after the football season's over, he would go to Australia and announce the finals. And Federer, he got really emotional. He really did. So he was one of the best ever. How can you dislike the guy? He's that damn good. Especially when he was in his prime. Before Novak and Rafa came in. This man was something else. 2019 was also a tennis, and that was Rafael Nadal winning the U.S. Open, the United States Open in New York. I remember watching that. That was a huge win for him. I think he faced Daniil Medvedev, the Russian player. And at the time, Daniil was like an upcoming big tennis player, So I'm like, maybe Daniil has a chance to win this, but no, it was Rafa. And obviously the crowd wanted Rafa to win because, he's up there with Federer. And that was big, man. It's crazy, man. All these championship games that I've seen on TV, it's, year after year. It gets, you're going back in time now, it's going back to the past. Think about it. Time flies, and now we're almost in, another year is almost over already, so, yeah. But I'm glad I'm doing this special episode. I know this episode is a little bit longer, but that's okay. We're almost done here. 2020. Yes, no fans, but I would have to go with the World Series, the LA Dodgers against the Tampa Bay Rays. That was a great World Series, despite having no crowd. The whole series was in Arlington, Texas, where the Texas Rangers play, and at the time that was a brand new stadium. That was the first year that ballpark opened in 2020. So, and they really were the two best teams, even though the season was so short. They only had a 60-game season, but they really were the two best teams. I forgot. I don't know if I was cheering for either team, but I don't think I was. I think I just wanted a good World Series, and it was a pretty good World Series. Especially that ending to what was it? Game 4. Game 4. The ending to Game 4 was wild. So I kind of wanted Tampa to win because Tampa has never won it. They've never won it. But the LA Dodgers, for many years, they've been a great team. So I would have to go with that one. 2021, the second best championship game that I watched in 2021 was the CFL Grey Cup between the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and the Hamilton Tiger Cats. And this was the first year that I watched it on the actual TSN network instead of the ESPN network. Because ESPN, they would have that bottom line ticker at the bottom. But TSN doesn't do that for their games. So, that was a great game. I wanted Hamilton to win because they haven't won it since the late 90s. And the previous year, or the previous season, 2019, because there was no season in 2020, they had a rematch. 2019 Grey Cup was also Winnipeg against Hamilton, and Winnipeg won that Grey Cup pretty easily. So 2021 came, and I wanted Hamilton to win, and they really could have won that, and the game went into overtime. I think this was the third Grey Cup in history that went into overtime. The overtime is kind of like the old college overtime rules in football, because the college football overtime rules now, they kind of suck in my opinion. I'm not a fan of that rule. But it was a great game. I forgot. I think Winnipeg scored first. I don't know if they scored a touchdown or a field goal, but it was Hamilton's turn to score, and game-winning interception. That's what happened, and that's what caused the game to be over. And Winnipeg has won it back-to-back years. And then Winnipeg lost the next 3 Grey Cups, 2022, 2023, and 2024. So Winnipeg Blue Bombers, they were in 5 straight Grey Cups. They won the first 2, and then they lost the next 3. Isn't that weird? That is weird. All right. 2022 is also the Grey Cup. I mentioned Winnipeg has lost the last 3. So they lost in 2022. They played against the Toronto Argonauts. That was also a great Grey Cup. Toronto won the game by 1 point. And a lot of these Grey Cup games are cold because they're in Canada. The Grey Cup's always around in mid-November, so it's always pretty cold there. And I wanted, I think I wanted Toronto to win. So, but that was a great Grey Cup game. 2023, back to tennis. That would have to be the Wimbledon final between Novak Djokovic and Carlos Alcaraz. That was a great Wimbledon final. I watched that live in the morning. It was a pretty long one. I wanted Novak to win. But, and you know, Novak was the favorite because he's won Wimbledon so many times. And Novak, he faced Carlos in the French Open semifinal earlier in 2023. So I'm like, I think Carlos might win the French Open. But no, Novak won the French Open. And Carlos won Wimbledon. You think it would be the opposite. I thought Carlos would win the French, And I thought Novak would win Wimbledon, but instead it was the opposite. Carlos basically made a comeback. It was a great Wimbledon final. You can tell, man. Carlos, at the time, man, he was the next big thing in tennis. He was the next big thing in tennis, and now he still is. He's going to be the favorite, or one of the favorites, to win the Australian Open. And he's younger than me. It's crazy. I'm 23 years old. I'm watching some athletes that are younger than me. It's insane. It is insane. All right. Now, 2024. The second best sports championship game that I watched. You know what? For some reason I actually didn't list 2024 the second best championship game I watched that year, but I did some research, and that is it's another tennis one, the 2024 Australian Open between Yannick Sinner and Daniil Medvedev. Okay? And it was probably the best final of 2024. Yannick Sinner he's also younger than me. Daniil Medvedev, he's been a big tennis player for the past 5 years or so, because I mentioned he was in the 2019 U.S. Open final. So I wanted Daniil to win, and he was winning. He was up. He won the first two sets, but then Yannick Sinner, he won the next three. He won the next three sets. Oh my gosh. And Yannick Sinner, he is that damn good. I wanted Daniil to win. But Yannick won. Sinner won. Sinner the winner. And I think Sinner will be the favorite, either him or Carlos. My prediction for the Australian Open in 2025, it's either going to be Sinner or Alcaraz. I kind of hope that's the final, because I don't think those two guys faced each other in a final, Grand Slam final. But hey, if Novak can somehow make it to the final, I'll cheer for him. Why not? So, there you have it. I talked about my two favorite sports championship games that I watched from 2013, the first year I got into watching sports, to 2024. What do you guys think? You guys let me know. And I know this episode was a lot longer. I didn't thought it would be this long, but that's okay. We're approaching the 1 hour mark, so I'm going to end this. So yeah, guys, Happy New Year. I'll see you guys on Friday, and we're going to kick off the 2025 sports calendar year. And the big thing will be the football playoffs, both college and the National Football League. That's usually the big thing in January, and then the Australian Open will begin later in January. So those will be the main things that I'll be talking about. So yeah, it's been a great year for sports, in my opinion, and another year has come to an end. So have a happy, safe New Year. Don't go crazy. I know I would always hear fireworks, but yeah. So, oh yeah, New Year's Eve night will be the next college football playoff game. I will watch that, and then there's 3 on New Year's Day. I will watch those as well. So we'll see how those goes. But this time, those games are on neutral sites. All right, guys, that is it. Have a happy, safe New Year, and I will see you guys on Friday, 2025 Here we come. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to Keith's Sports News.